This is a treasure hoard that's been found in late 2018 in Kazakhstan, as we call it today, in the Upper Eurasian steppes, associated with the ancient Saka people of the Saka Sunni, who we talked about recently and last year, and talking about how Proto-Europeans and how made it through, made connections to their Isaac and Kurgan burials, and how Isaac is associated with the biblical patriarch and the 12 tribes and situations, but also the connection of how the Saka Sunni end up becoming known as the Saxons at a later date of Anglo-Saxon fame, and exactly how that worked out. If you look here, you can see some delicate gold work that's done, and also inlays, very intricate, with this turquoise inlays and things. That's very important, showing their gold work, and a lot of their other gold work shows a micro bead work that we've shown in other videos. It's not necessarily in the pictures here, of itty bitty micro beads that are all extremely uniform and have been soldered to things. This type of treasure has been found swept across into the west, and is associated many times with Phoenician traders. And there's good reason for that, for there was an ancient connection to these people from back before there was a known Silk Road and how that all goes. And we talked about that last year. So there are videos connected to that. There's a nice gold necklace that's thrown in here. It's believed that most, if not all, of these deer are fawn type apparitions here, were inlaid like the one that you see that's there, but the pieces had fallen out, and one wonders if then they're fine sifting if they found them and the intricate little pieces. You also see these barrels all over the place, and these barrels are what are meant to be the hasp of what connects these arrows to their shafts. There are these spikes here, and I don't know what exactly they are for, but looking at these arrowheads here, you can tell a few things about them. One thing is that they're 3,000 years old and set out in an area that gets rain and so on percolating down through it, and they are made out of a type of steel that's not corrosive. You set any metal object, screwdriver, anything out for a while, and it's not going to look like that through a season. But amazingly, these have kept their shape, their point, their everything to them. They're specially made with that fluting that you see at the back part of the blade coming in to actually cause bleeds. But we know that we didn't need arrows that were of this quality to actually kill deer and fawn like are on the left over there. It could have been done in a much easier way. In fact, in a burial like this, you would think that they would be using flint weapons, but these people were far past that point. In fact, they want to give him the ultimate of weapons to be able to use to carry into the afterlife, and in doing so, they've left this remnant that's very telling, because if you've studied armor and weapons and so on, you can make the proof of who these people are by that weapon alone, not even with the other artifacts and the saga and the tales, by finding that type of a weapon of an arrowhead showing up much later over in Europe. Let's get into this story here because it's kind of telling. It's up in Kazakhstan, and nowadays we have problems in Kazakhstan and places like that somewhat, and there's been wars and so on going there, and people living in cave networks and so on up in there, and Lord knows what they've run into trying to find their place and so on. Once everything calms down, you'd be surprised, there's probably a lot of these places that have just been ransacked. But that's probably for another video, but I hope not. Thousands of gold and precious metal items are found in a Saka burial mound. The Kazakhstan government has announced a very exciting archaeological find in a remote mountainous area of the country. A team of archaeologists has unearthed a huge trove of golden objects and jewelry. The find is considered to be one of the most important in relation to the ancient Saka people and culture, one of the most significant in the history of Kazakhstan area. This treasure is expected to yield important insights into the lives of the once mighty Saka people. Well, who were the Saka? The Saka were a nomadic people who spoke an Iranian language, like the Sumerians, and were a subgroup of the great Scythian group that we know about, who dominated the Eurasian steppes, spelt wrong, for centuries. The Saka core area was in Central Asia, and from here they expanded into Iran, into India, and into Central Asia. They were renowned for their horsemanship and their metalwork. The Saka were first recorded in the 9th century BC and a major military power by the Greeks, and they made all these comments about them and so on. However, they faded from the pages of history over time, but archaeologists have been rediscovering their culture and history in the 20th century here now. And so we look out here, and what you can see is an ancient burial mound that they have gone with, and it's kind of a tell, if you will, and it tells you a lot. It has sacred alignments going with it, and so on. If you look real close, you can see that there are truck tracks drawn in here and here and here where people have come out here in a modern way. In fact, there's a man and somebody else in a blue jacket and a red jacket sitting right in the heart of the center of it. It's probably one of the archaeologists. But laid out in this Isaac or Kurgan type burial that you see here, it's all with this circle and a clock wheel and the 4 cardinal points and so on. In the distance there, you can see another good sized one too. Behind it, you can see another one. And on the left and the right, lined up with it, you can also see a couple on either side, so there's 3 in a line right here. Not quite as big. Instantly thoughts come to mind, well, here's a king, and here's that, and then here's another king, and here's princes, and so on. Got to start getting into these pretty quick here, because things will start happening. So the burial mound is one of 200 or so found in this Eleki Sezi plateau area. It's a real treasure trove. Kazakhstani archaeologists were excavating a kurgan or burial mound in the remote Eleki Sezi plateau in the northeast of the Central Asian Republic. The team expert is led by Professor Zaniola Samashev, who stated that a large number of valuable finds in this burial mound was unearthed. Reports to Kitco News. The site was first excavated 2 years ago, but there were also some digging at the site way back in the 18th century during the reign of Tsar Peter the Great. Makes you wonder what he was looking for. In total, some 3,000 golden objects have been recovered. The golden treasure includes plates and jewelry, including chains with precious stones and bell-shaped earrings. A large number of exquisitely crafted animals have also been found. There's also been a great number of golden beads that were used to decorate the elaborate clothing of the Saka. It is believed that the find dates from approximately 2,800 to 3,000 years ago. So here's a grouping of those beads that look like it would have been attached to a necklace, and you can see there's a few different forms. There's like a bell or an oval shape. There's separators, and then there's those barrels that have the lines all over them. It's probably done in a pattern, if you will, but hey, if you melted this all the way down, you may get $150 out of it. To the right collector or museum, you could string it along like it used to be in a setup, and they would easily pay $20,000 or more for something like this. But they get looted all the time, and then that just goes away. So it's amazing, and it's a good thing, I think, that museums and people do this type of thing in archaeology. I recently, on one of my other vids, was somebody griping about how people, they're disturbing the dead or doing this, that, and the other and stuff. And, well, they got there and they said it had already been looted, and they were lucky to find these pieces. So if we didn't have that, we would have nothing. I mean, would you rather have nothing and not know it ever existed? I'm sure some people would. But in another way, it's a museum. Just like the idea of zoos, where you're never going to get to go to wherever and see this whatever. But here's one. And these people have trained and learned how to keep care of them and so on. But it all goes with domesticating animals, the master of beasts, and things like that. And it can show you things that are rare on the planet that you probably would never see. And here it is in one area, as a museum or a zoological exhibit. The burial mound is thought to be the final resting place of a noble couple or a family who belonged to the Saka elite. Typically, members of the elite were buried in kurgans or Isaac-type burials. The team of archaeologists has still not uncovered the remains of those who were buried in the mound, and this raises the prospect of even more discoveries. So I'm not sure how they would find the actual earrings and things that would have gone on the ear and not found the bodies yet. Now, there can be a stash and a jewelry box with it in it and stuff like that that are extra, because it sounds like it's pretty gaudy if they had all this on their bodies, kind of somewhat. But you look at the Varna culture and some of these things and how they added a drape around the burial and red ochre and things like that all into it. So cinnabar, if you will. And so that's a strange statement. Let's continue. The discovery of the treasure is demonstrating a great metalworking skills of the Saka people. The golden objects demonstrate that they could rivet gold, and according to the Sun, show sophisticated micro soldering techniques. This allowed them to create beautiful jewelry and other artifacts. Now, what they've taken here is little micro beads. This, you see it in the Scythians too, and it's still a marvel to this day that they take uniform, perfect little beads and they put them all around on things. It's just one form of this soldering type thing. So they would have had to keep the object itself heated to a point, but not to a melting point, of course. And then gotten some real sharp pin type pointed object, little daub on the end of it, and gotten it extremely hot, back and forth, and then melted that to it in a way that doesn't look like they just smeared it and half melted a chunk of butter on it. No, it's done in a perfect way. And what's amazing is there's hundreds of them around objects, and they're uniformly spaced perfectly and so on. And you'd think that that little type of filigree would get knocked off real easy, and yet there are very few that are missing little pieces of it. It's welded to itself in an old soldering brazing type technique. It didn't hurt that little bead whenever they did it either. People that are jewelers have gotten into this thing and they're like, wow, and it shows a technique and a knowledge and all this type of thing that you want to give credit, especially to a nomadic people here that are going around. This allowed them to create beautiful jewelry and other artifacts. They clearly had advanced metallurgical skills and were adept at mining and extracting gold and other metals. Where you can see that they were able to make a type of iron that's really somewhat non-corrosive. Pretty good at it. So here's another look at this type of thing and these emblems. Now this harkens into where we talked about elves and so on. You look at some of their things and they had somewhat pointy hats and pointy boots. A lot of people made other connections. And the people through the Levant at one time. And all this old effigies. They say, well, where are the pointy ears at? Well, right there on those animals, for whenever they effigize themselves in an old way that's connected to the animals and nature. They draw themselves quite frequently with, like Hathor, cow ears or goat ears and things like that, like the satyrs that we talked about. a long time ago and recently even. And there you go. So there have been great excitement here in Kazakhstan at the announcement of the discovery. Kitgut News reports that Daniel Akhmedov, the local governor, stated that the find gives us a complete different view of the history of our people. The discovery of the priceless golden object shows that the people of Kazakhstan are descended from a great culture. The importance of the find. Well, if they find the bodies to go along with it and then do genetics and so on like that, let's just not talk about that. The importance of the find. The discovery of so many astonishing gold objects is demonstrating the sophistication of the Saka and that they were master craft persons. It also demonstrates that despite the fact that the Saka were nomads, they were very advanced. The discovery of the golden object and the expectations of many more in the Kurgan will allow experts to gain more insights into the Saka and their culture. So you can see one of these burials here off in the steppe area, and they have these stelae that are set up. You know, something that you would probably correlate with Egypt or someplace in the Levant, but you see this same type thing here, and it looks like maybe they found an old graveyard in the old Wild West times and stuff, but in reality, this is from at least 3,000 years ago. Yeah, that shape even looks like it too, and we've made comments about that before. But it designates different things, and a lot of people have said these stelae designate a certain area that's for certain people, like a duchy or barons of areas and all these type of things that are put up long ago, and boundaries in areas that you shouldn't cross sometimes necessarily, especially if you don't know who the hell you're running into. There are plans for more excavations in the area. It's believed that there are some 200 burial sites in the locality. There are so many located here because, according to the Daily Mail, the plateau with rich pastures has seen a paradise by the ancient Saka kings. However, experts are cautious about how many more discoveries are yet to be made. That's because the grave robbers and looters have long been removing precious items from these kurgans if they can find them. In fact, in a modern day, the reason we find them is usually looking at satellite images or even taking something over and above an area, because quite often you can walk right by it and not even notice it. Sometimes it's just a hump. And really, until Göbekli Tepe and so on, there weren't so much interest in a little hump in the ground. But now we come to find out there's a lot of things under that little bump here and that little bump there. So there's stories about these people where they would take and plant a crop and leave. And that makes no sense when you hear the way they said it and everything. Well, what are they doing? Well, they're nomadic, and they're going over here and spreading seed in another place and other types of seeds, and then they're migrating back. Well, whenever they migrate back into this valley during the spring, there's all kinds of wheat growing, and there's a lush environment waiting for them. And if they did the Johnny Appleseed, or the way that the grasshopper and the ants work out in the old tale, they have something extra coming back in a flip-flop way. Make no bones about it, it's perfected agriculture, but in a way it's preemptive agriculture. It looks kind of odd that they would do something like that, but whenever somebody looks at something, the people that were kind of, well, elven-like, if you will, in their ways, and in tune with nature and the way we look at it today of the Amerindians and how they did it to follow herds and so on, maybe one could make an understanding. A lot of these yurts and these huts that they have look extremely like teepees and so on, and we've made connection to, like, well, the Wayback Machine, if the Indians came from this upper area, there was contact with them in the ancient times. That's how they got some of their symbols. That's how they got some of their admixes, it seems, that showed up on the earliest people. But that's for another video. Anyhow, exciting. 200 or so burials possible here. So we hope that maybe even half of them haven't been plundered. I mean, we could only hope for something like that, right? But in that way, they could find out a lot about the culture. And there might be just an exciting find waiting on the next little bump over there. They're doing that one with that wheel, and you can see they're working through it and haven't even found the bodies yet. And because it's such a tell, there may be quite a bit under that one just itself. But notice that we saw 3 behind him and 1 behind that. And I wonder what it looks like if you look the other way, up on this sacred valley. It's kind of hidden, but nobody really paid any attention to. How many valleys are like this, and how many edge of cliff caves are there through this ancient area? Like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy, and we'll get on to more. Peace.